Room 13 presents. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow through the mist as a lone figure emerged from the swirling fog to stare at the neglected structure. The old hotel, Forsyth Manor, stood like a long-forgotten relic of a time when people still believed in the elegance and excitement of travel. Now it loomed ominously in the darkness, its windows like sunken eyes staring out onto the empty street. Emily Harper pocketed her keys, her heart drumming a nervous beat against her chest. A sense of unease had lingered around her ever since she'd agreed to this. Her editor had insisted that she stay at the hotel to dive deep into its mysterious past for a feature piece. A retreat into the chilling depths of history he'd promised. Little did Emily know just how treacherous that retreat would become. The creeping ivy seemed to shrug off the ghostly light and blend into the manor's weathered brick as she made her way to the front door. It was heavy, of wood and iron, and creaked dramatically as she pushed it open. The foyer was dark, save for a lone chandelier, its layers of dust dimming the light into a murky gloom. The air was thick with the smell of must and something old and sorrowful. Her footsteps echoed as she approached the reception desk. An ancient bell sat unused, its surface tarnished with age. There was no one to greet her, only the endless drip of water from somewhere unseen. She hesitated, wondering for a moment if she'd made the right decision, but then reminded herself why she was here. As she retrieved her room key and guest log, curiosity steered her eyes towards an old register book. The pages were rough and yellowed, the ink smudged and faded. Yet the room numbers were clear enough, written in an elegant script. A strange sense of déjà vu washed over her as her finger traced a line to room 13, a room shrouded in legends of ghostly whispers and inexplicable disappearances. It was where she would be staying. Strange, she murmured to herself, as a sudden draft swept a chill up her spine. The stories hadn't mentioned much more than rumors, tales enough to intrigue but not satisfy. She ascended the grand staircase, the old wood responding beneath her weight with weary sighs. When she reached the dimly lit corridor of the second floor, her footsteps fell silent on the old carpet, worn thin by years of neglect. Each door she passed seemed more foreboding than the last, until she found herself before the tarnished brass number, 13. For a moment, Emily considered sleeping in her car or asking for another room, but logic reminded her that the hotel was practically deserted. No other rooms would be prepared. She turned the key in the lock, exhaling slowly as she pushed her way inside. The room was predictably old, the air stale and oppressive, with the faint echo of laughter brushed into the wallpaper. A brass bed frame stood stark against the far wall, the sheets pulled taut across the mattress like a shroud. An armchair slumped in one corner, sighing beneath a weight long removed. Emily flicked the switch on a nearby lamp, draping the room in muted gold. She went to the window, pulling the heavy curtains aside to look out over the grounds. The garden was an untamed mess of vines and shadows, the statues appearing more like guardians than relics. Beyond, the world seemed to vanish into an endless sea of fog. Sinking into the armchair with her notebook, she began to jot down initial observations, absorbing the clamor of night sounds seeping through the walls. Then it came, a faint whisper. Emily froze, the pencil halting above the paper as her heart muffled all awareness of the world, save for that sound. It was an unintelligible murmur, as if a conversation unfolded just beyond the physical realm. She strained to listen, breath held tight, and for a moment, there was nothing. Shaking it off as her imagination, she resumed writing, occasionally glancing at the flickering lamp as it cast grotesque shadows that danced over the peeling wallpaper. She scolded herself for being so jumpy, though the thickness in the air felt almost palpable now. Time slipped away until her lids threatened to close, heavy with a longing for rest. Just as she surrendered to sleep, the whispering returned with a growing clarity. Words twisted through the air like smoke from a dying fire. Her name seemed wrapped into the whispers, imploring yet indistinct. Emily, Emily. She sat up, sleep's tendrils falling away as panic seized her senses. The sound ceased abruptly, leaving behind an unnatural stillness, as if the room held its breath. In the corner of her vision, the mirror seemed to flicker, with an energy unlike any reflection she'd known. Was it moving? Or did it merely show a room that wasn't there? Gathering her courage, Emily rose and approached the mirror, peering closely. Her own reflection met her fears, but her eyes were drawn into the depths beyond them, to where shadowy images ebbed and flowed, a delicate interaction of realities. Her hand reached up to touch its surface, and for a moment it was warm, pulsing like the walls of a living thing. A jarring jolt of electricity shot through her hand, and she pulled back with a gasp. Turning sharply, Emily scanned the room for any sign of disturbance, her heart thudding like a drumbeat of dread. The sheets on the bed barely moved, the window panes rattling only with the breeze. She considered her options. How could she leverage such fragile sanity against the surreal experiences of the night? Her instincts told her to leave, abandon the assignment. But the allure of the mystery, the origins of those whispers, held her captive to room 13. Morning light filtering through the ominous structure found Emily at the antique desk, poring over historical records and traveler accounts she'd retrieved from the library earlier that day. They spoke of transient guests meeting unusual ends, vanishing into the night as if claimed by the very walls. As she thumbed through a faded photograph from the late 1800s, her heart skipped a beat. There, among a group of somber-looking guests, stood a woman with an uncanny resemblance to herself. Same features, the same, almost resigned expression. The woman wore a familiar locket, the very one that Emily had found beneath the loose floorboard earlier, gracing her own neck as she puzzled over the discovery. She was connected, somehow, inexplicably woven into the fabric of this place. As if seeking guidance, Emily returned to the mirror, hoping it could offer some insight now that daylight softened the fear. The mirror, though still haunting in its silence, appeared tranquil enough, an ordinary pane of silvered glass in the daylight. She retrieved a notepad, feeling the burden of expectation lingering over her shoulder, the stories begging for release. Night crept back with the relentless certainty of the tide, laying claim to the hotel and its unwilling guest. Emily prepped herself for rest, knowing she needed clarity to piece together the disjointed riddles of Forsyth Manor. Her tired mind replayed moments as if seeking threads that would stitch a coherent narrative from madness. Moments after her head touched the pillow, the whispers rekindled, stronger now, nearly forceful in their urgency, as if the walls themselves breathed secrets. The air grew colder, a throbbing presence manifest instantaneously. This was not imagination. This was something else. Her feet fought the tangles of the sheets as she stood. The whispers escalated to a cacophony, building a crescendo until everything stopped, leaving only silence so stark she could nearly hear the weave of the fabric itself. Hands trembling, Emily moved to the window, drawn by an unseen force. She hoped to find solace in the world outside, yet only saw the shadows woven through the garden, unnatural shapes twisted through the vines. At the statue's base, something glimmered, a radiant, mournful light. Dressed as hurriedly as possible, she set out with a flashlight into the night. Her steps crunched against gravel as she sought the answer buried there. The garden seemed to hold its breath, an audience of statues observing her movements. When she reached the statue, the beam of her flashlight fell upon the source of the light, a weathered journal partially buried among the roots. She had almost dreamt of it, called toward it with uncanny precision. The journal was damp, nearly crumbling in her hands, its script hard to make out but determined to be read nonetheless. Each page unveiled an age-old narrative crafted by an eloquent hand, the words bleeding out tales tragically familiar. Flipping through, Emily absorbed the tales within, until the passage encrypted in the final page caught her breath. The handwriting, echoing the elegant script from the hotel ledger, and her ancestors' letters matched her own in curious similarity. History had twisted, the reflections cascading until all paths led back to room 13. The ink remained vivid, washed into the pages by time. Bloodlines never truly fade in Forsyth Manor, where echoes spiral unending, caught in mirrors until they awaken once more. Emily, you carry this legacy, this purpose unwritten yet woven in fate's looms. Find your past, define your future. A sudden gust rifled the pages, chilling her to her core, the whispers swirling again around her ears, but this time welcoming in tone. Acceptance, rather than warning. Realization gripped her. She wasn't simply an outsider documenting history. She was the key, forsaken daughters called to mend rupture across the ages. The journal wasn't just a memory, it was a binding, stitched through names and voices known and unclaimed. In the distance, the manor silently awaited her return through the whispers of her ancestors, echoes of a narrative still weaving. Clarity surged, a final breath before she fully assumed her place within the continuity. A story as old as time itself, contained within forsaken walls, waiting for truth to awaken from memory's shadows. Emily Harper stood alone under the moon, embraced by Forsyth Manor, at once hunted and finally at home.